My son sent me a text message on my 65th birthday that broke my heart but saved my bank account. He wrote, "Dad, stop calling us. Don't expect us to take care of you in your old age because I have my own life and family now. Sell your big house and check yourself into a nursing home." I read the message twice, took a sip of my bourbon, and walked to my wall safe. He had no idea that the house he'd told me to sell was the only thing standing between him and a prison cell. He had no idea that the lavish life he was enjoying had been bankrolled by loans he'd long since forgotten signing. I didn't rage. I simply opened my ledger and resolved to collect what was owed. My name is Warren Hartwell, and this is the story of how I showed my ungrateful son that the bank of Dad is officially closed. Welcome back to His Hidden Revenge. I'm glad you're here with me today. If these stories stay with you long after the last word, I'd be grateful if you'd like this one and subscribe so you never miss the next. Before we get into it, tell me in the comments, what are you hoping to carry with you from a story like this? A lesson, a feeling, or maybe just the reminder that things can turn around? One more thing before we begin: this story contains fictional elements woven in for the purpose of storytelling, and any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental. It's the truth underneath the story that I hope lands with you. My 65th birthday arrived without ceremony. A party was never something I expected. Miriam was gone, and she had been the one who turned this house into something warm, the balloons, the smell of a roasting bird filling every room. But a phone call, 5 minutes. Some small sign that I still registered on my son's radar, that I had allowed myself to hope for. Instead, I sat in my leather armchair across from a dead fireplace, waiting. My phone rested on the side table, dark and quiet. 3 times I'd picked it up and checked the volume, convinced I must have missed something. I hadn't. 7 o'clock came, and the screen finally flared to life. Something small and embarrassing lurched inside my chest. My hands were composed as I picked it up. They always are. 40 years as a structural engineer, designing bridges that held through earthquakes, will do that to a man. My hands do not shake. The message was from Devin. No call, no video, so I could see Finn's face. Just text, dense and deliberate. I settled my reading glasses on my nose and absorbed what he had written. "Dad, Vanessa and I have been talking. You are reaching retirement age officially today. We want to set some boundaries now to avoid awkwardness later. Don't expect us to take care of you or invite you to live with us when you get too old. I have my own life, my own family, and my own financial pressure. You need to be realistic. Sell your house, use the money to pay for a facility, and don't become a burden on us. Happy birthday." I went through it twice. The second time I said the words aloud, my voice thin and strange in that empty room. Happy birthday. That last line was the thing. He'd shoved a blade between my ribs and finished the job with a bow and a ribbon. I let my gaze travel the room. The grand piano sat against the wall. Devin had learned on that piano $300 a month for 6 years of lessons. I never begrudged him. He stopped playing at 18 and hadn't looked back. Above the fireplace hung a photo from his college graduation. Every dollar of that degree came from me. The dorm, the books he never cracked, the fraternity dues that rented him a social life. Another man might have wept. A softer one might have grabbed the phone, called his son, asked in a trembling voice what he'd done to deserve this. Instead, something shifted in me. Not rage, something colder. The shame that had been climbing my throat reversed course and solidified. The engineer took the controls. This was a structural failure, plain and simple. You don't stand at a collapsing bridge and cry. You close it off, post the signs, and stop throwing good money after bad. I set the phone down without a sound, rose, moved to the kitchen, and measured out 2 fingers of aged bourbon I'd been holding in reserve for a worthy moment. As it turned out, the death of a man's illusions qualified. I tipped the glass and let the heat spread through my chest. My study was next. That room has always been my refuge, old paper and lemon oil in the air, the heavy oak desk anchoring the space. A canvas of the Portland skyline hung behind the chair. I lifted it off the wall. The steel safe was where it always was. I worked the dial from memory. Left to 32, right to 10, left to 55. Each tumbler gave way with a clean mechanical click. The door opened onto documents, not cash. I've never trusted cash too easy for fire to settle the matter. What I kept there were papers arranged with precision. From the outside, I was a pensioner, a gray-haired widower in a 6-year-old Chevy pickup coasting toward the end. That's what Devin saw when he looked at me. A dwindling account, a frail old man, an easy target. He had it backwards. I drew out the thick black leather binder. Onto the desk it went. I clicked on the brass reading lamp and the light settled over the cover. My ledger. 5 years back, when I cashed out my share of the construction firm, $4 million after taxes came with me. I kept that entirely to myself, where Devin was concerned. Character I believed was something a person had to forge without a cushion beneath them. Hard work was the forge. I'd wanted that for my son. I had failed. I opened the binder to the first of its plastic sleeves, each one holding a document. Not keepsakes, not gestures, legally binding notarized promissory notes. The first page took me back a decade. Devin had just finished his degree and launched himself into real estate. The problem, he explained, was the vehicle. A Porsche Cayenne was the only option. Image was currency in his business. I countered with something sensible, a reliable Toyota. He told me reliable didn't close deals. Vanessa had curled her lip at my pickup around that time, so I wrote the check and handed him the keys, $80,000. But I put a piece of paper in front of him first. He thought it was theater. He sat there grinning, tossing the keys from hand to hand, barely skimming the page. "Dad, why do we have to be so formal?" he'd said. "Business is business," I told him. His signature was a careless loop, bold and self-satisfied on the line. I traced it with one finger. Promissory note 001. Principal amount $80,000. Interest rate 2%. Next page. The wedding. God, that wedding. Vanessa had her heart set on Willamette Valley wine country, imported orchids, a live string quartet, the full spectacle. I floated the idea of a church in Portland, dignified, meaningful, affordable. She burst into tears, told Devin I was trying to steal her moment. He appeared in my doorway a day later, looking at the floor, voice quiet. I wrote the check. $150,000. Promissory note 05. Devin and Vanessa both signed. Half drunk on champagne, they probably assumed it was something for the caterer. The pages kept coming. The penthouse down payment. The emergency transfer when Devin's credit card gave out mid-trip across Europe. The capital injection when Vanessa's boutique hemorrhaged money until there was nothing left to bleed. The final entry stopped me cold. 6 months old. Devin had appeared at my door, ashen and rigid. A real estate flip he'd bet everything on had cratered. Without $50,000, he was going to lose his license. I handed it over. The spreadsheet total stared back at me from the last page. $482,500. Principal only. Factor in the accrued interest, and the figure crossed $500,000. But figures were never the point. The point was a short paragraph that appeared at the foot of every document. Clause 4, Section B. I read it to the room. The lender, Warren Hartwell, reserves the right to demand full repayment of the principal and accrued interest at any time for any reason. This note is callable on demand. Upon receipt of a formal demand letter, the borrower has 30 days to settle the debt in full before legal proceedings and asset seizure commence. Callable on demand. Devin had signed 15 variations of those words without absorbing a syllable. To him, these papers were props, something to humor his sentimental old father. He believed he had a permanent safety net and a man too soft to ever pull it away. I picked up the phone one more time and reread the message. "Don't expect us to take care of you." The ledger closed with the finality of a vault door. In the stillness, it sounded like a shot. "You want boundaries, son? You want distance and independence and your own life. I can arrange that. Let's find out what independence looks like once the bank moves in." Sleep was off the table. I got up, pulled a clean sheet from the printer, and sat back down with my fountain pen. This letter was not going to Devin. It was going to my attorney, Mr. Carver. My hand was perfectly still. "Dear Carver, please prepare the necessary filings to activate Clause B of the Hartwell Family Trust without delay. Devin Hartwell is to be removed as a beneficiary. I am enclosing copies of 15 promissory notes. A formal demand letter for the full amount is to reach Devin's office by courier first thing Monday." I stopped. Finn's photo was on the corner of the desk, my grandson's face open and unknowing, the one person in this whole sorry situation who hadn't earned any of it. Guilt moved through me briefly. I let it pass. If I left the rod in place to spare my own feelings, Finn would spend his life learning to be exactly what his father was entitled: small and cruel. I kept writing. If payment is not received within 30 days, initiate foreclosure proceedings on all collateral, including his primary residence and personal vehicles. I put my name at the bottom, Warren Arthur Hartwell. Outside Portland was beginning to lighten that gray early glow, pushing through the blinds, catching the dust motes drifting in the air. Something had lifted off me. A father carries weight that doesn't have a name, particularly when the child he's carrying refuses to stand on his own feet. A creditor carries nothing so complicated. Numbers either balance or they don't. I went to the kitchen, filled the pot, and waited for the coffee. Devin's message had stopped hurting. The math had replaced it. If anything, I was almost grateful for what he'd done. He had handed me the permission I'd been waiting for to stop playing the role of father and start being something colder. A teacher. He wanted me to unload the house. He wanted me tucked away in some facility out of sight so he could wait for the obituary and collect what was left. I drained the last of my black coffee. Bitter, hot. Monday was going to rattle the real estate market in Portland. My son was about to discover that torching a bridge is a dangerous move when you're still standing on it. The elevator to the 42nd floor of Fox Tower was swift and silent, my ears popping as the doors parted to reveal the polished marble reception of Carver and Associates. This was a place built for two things: protecting fortunes and dismantling lives, both accomplished with the stroke of a very costly pen. I passed the receptionist. She knew me by name, my black leather ledger pressed to my chest like body armor. I hadn't come to lay a foundation or raise a structure. I'd come to bring one down. Edmund Carver was already waiting. 30 years of friendship going back to the days I was a site manager and he was a public defender with worn-through souls. These days he dressed in Italian suits and carried the eyes of a man who had cataloged every flavor of human greed. He didn't reach for the coffee carafe. He took one look at my face and poured sparkling water into 2 glasses instead. He settled behind the mahogany desk, a fortress overlooking a city my son had always been desperate to conquer. I didn't speak. I unlocked my phone and pushed it across the polished surface. Devin's text sat there glowing. Carver put on his reading glasses and worked through it without a word. His face gave nothing away. No sharp intake of breath, no slow head shake. Just a long exhalation through his nose, the sound a doctor produces when a scan confirms what he feared. He slid the phone back across the desk, so his voice was low and gravelly. "It begins." I nodded. I told him I was finished waiting. Lectures and warnings had run their course. I laid the black ledger on the desk in front of him. Carver opened it. He moved through the promissory notes methodically, dates, figures, signatures. He slowed at the Porsche. He paused on the wedding. He spent a long moment with the penthouse down payment. Then he raised his eyes, a thin, precise smile forming at the corners of his mouth. "You kept them," he said. "You actually kept them all." I told him I never discarded a contract. Carver closed the binder and eased back in his chair, fingers steepled. He had the look of something patient and dangerous that had just caught a scent. "Warren," he said, "do you understand what you have in front of you? This is not simply a catalog of debts. This is a nuclear option. Most parents hand money to their children and call it a gift. They might use the word loan, but they never put it on paper. They never notarize it. When the child walks away, the parent has no legal ground to stand on. But this is different." He pressed 2 fingers onto the leather cover. "These are demand notes, Warren. Do you recall what I told you when we drew up these templates 10 years ago? The acceleration clause is the most lethal instrument in contract law. Clause 4, Section B. You don't need to wait for a missed payment. You don't need to wait for him to run dry. You can call the full balance every dollar of principal plus interest for no reason beyond the fact that you've chosen to." I asked him to walk me through the mechanics. I needed the picture laid out clearly. I needed to know precisely what was heading toward my son. Carver rose and moved to the window, studying the wet streets of Portland below. "Here is exactly how it works," he said, turning back. "We draft a formal demand letter today. Every note in this ledger gets cited by name. We calculate the interest compounded annually at the federal minimum, call it generous, which brings the running total to just under $500,000. We send it via certified mail to his office, not his home address. His office. We want his assistant's signature on the receipt. We want that timestamp on record." He let a beat of silence underscore the strategy. "The moment someone signs for that letter, the clock is running. 30 days. Warren, he has exactly 30 days to hand you a check for $482,000. When he can't, and neither of us believes he can, he's in default. On day 31, we file a motion for summary judgment. The notes are notarized, the signatures are clean, so there's no trial, no jury seated. The judge reviews the paperwork, confirms the debt, and bangs the gavel. I asked what comes after the judgment. Carver walked back and braced both hands on the desk, his gaze level with mine. That is when it gets interesting. We obtain a writ of execution. That document gives the sheriff authority to move against his assets and satisfy what's owed. We freeze his accounts. We garnish his income. We place a lien on that penthouse he prizes so highly. And because that penthouse is almost certainly mortgaged to capacity, our lien triggers a default event with his mortgage lender. The bank will foreclose before we're required to do another thing. His voice dropped to nearly a whisper. We will strip him, Warren. Credit score, assets, professional reputation. His ability to borrow so much as $1 from any institution in this country for the next 7 years. He won't qualify for a rental. He won't be able to sign a car lease. He will be financial dust. I looked down at the ledger. I thought about Devin at 5 years old, wobbling on a bicycle while I ran alongside him. The way he used to look at me as though I were the most unbreakable thing in the world. The afternoon I bent down and showed him how to loop a shoelace. Something lurched in my stomach. Was I genuinely going to do this? Was I going to reduce my own son to rubble over a text message? I looked at Carver. I admitted that perhaps this was too severe. Perhaps I should simply remove him from the will and leave it there. Let him drift. He is still my son, Edmund. He is still the boy I carried on my shoulders. Carver didn't flinch. He reached into a drawer, produced a file, and dropped it on the desk. It skidded across the mahogany and came to rest directly in front of me. "Open it," he said. I did. A background check, a detailed financial investigation report. I asked him what I was looking at. He told me he had commissioned it 6 months ago when I mentioned the $50,000 request for the real estate flip. He wanted to verify the deal was legitimate. It wasn't. There had been no real estate transaction. Warren, he used your $50,000 to settle a gambling debt with a bookie in Las Vegas. I stared at the page. Wire transfers, dates, everything documented. Carver's voice went flat and hard. This wasn't disrespect, Warren. This was theft. He has been running a con on you, lying to your face. And that text message wasn't some eruption of emotion. It was a calculation. He decided the well was dry, and rather than thank the man who dug it, he threw the bucket in. He believes you are weak. He has you filed away as a lonely old man who will absorb whatever is handed to him because he cannot bear the silence. He leveled a finger across the desk. If you walk away from this, you are not protecting him. You are feeding something that should not be fed. He is 32 years old. Consequences not learned now will never be learned. And your grandson? What about Finn? Do you want Finn growing up watching his father treat a man like a resource to be depleted and discarded? Finn's name finished it. I thought about my grandson in that house watching, absorbing, learning what a man was supposed to look like. I thought about the same pattern running forward another 30 years. I closed the file. The hesitation was gone. The engineer was back at the controls. The structural failure had been fully assessed. The demolition order was ready to sign. I told Carver to proceed. He nodded once. His hand found the intercom button. Audrey, bring in the notary and the standard demit letter templates and pull the trust documents for the Hartwell estate. We have amendments to make. For the next hour, the only sound in the room was my pen moving across paper. I put my signature on the trust amendment, striking Devin from the document entirely. In his place, I established a new irrevocable trust for Finn funds he couldn't touch until he reached 25 with a condition requiring him to be working and drug-free. Then Carver slid the demand letter across the desk. I picked it up and read it. Brief, ice-cold, formally lethal, outstanding debt obligations. Dear Mr. Hartwell, this firm acts on behalf of your creditor, Mr. Warren Hartwell. Pursuant to the terms of the promissory notes attached hereto, we are hereby exercising the acceleration clause effective immediately. You are required to remit the total sum of $482,500 within 30 calendar days. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action. I held the pen above the signature line. My hand was steady, my chest was not. It felt like something solid and heavy had settled behind my sternum. This was the moment everything changed. Once that envelope left this office, there was no retrieving it. This wasn't a bill. It was a declaration of war. I let Devin's text run through my mind one final time. Don't expect us to take care of you. I signed. The ink went down, black and final. Carver lifted the letter, slid it into a crisp white envelope, and pressed a red certified mail stamp across the seal. Return receipt requested. It goes into the Morning Dispatch. He said Devin would have it by Monday. I got to my feet. Fatigue sat on me, but beneath it something else had arrived, a strange, clean clarity. The fog of obligation had burned away. Whatever existed between my son and me was no longer held together by guilt or a father's instinct. It was governed now by a contract. I had one last question for Carver. I asked whether he thought Devin would call me once the letter landed. Carver rose and extended his hand. His grip was solid and unhurried. He will call you Warren. He will shout. He will cry. He may even threaten. But for the first time, you will hear something different underneath all of it. Because for the first time in his life, he will be calling you as a man who finally understands what you actually hold over him. You are not just his father. You are the one who holds the keys to his cage. I walked back through the office and stepped into the elevator. The doors came together and sealed me in. I watched the floor numbers drop on the panel. 40, 30, 20, the street, the rain, the empty house waiting for me. But I wasn't descending as someone's discarded problem. I was going back down as the plaintiff, and God help the defendant when the court comes to order. While I was in a lawyer's office signing away their inheritance, my son and his wife were settled in at the most expensive brunch spot in downtown Portland. The Copper Terrace was the kind of establishment where a glass of orange juice ran $15 and the walls were dressed in velvet. It was built for people who needed to be witnessed, and Devin and Vanessa had built their entire existence around being seen. They occupied a prime window table, drenched in the same gray light that weighed on me, though on them it probably looked like silver. Devin's phone vibrated against the white tablecloth. He glanced at it, and a slow, satisfied smirk moved across his face. He didn't call me back. He didn't show the slightest ripple of concern. He simply angled the screen toward Vanessa so she could read what I'd sent. He folded. Devin said it loudly enough for the surrounding tables to catch every word. I told you he would. The old man is predictable. Vanessa read the message, the one where I'd said I was selling the house and checking into a care facility. She let out a laugh that sounded like something breaking. She clapped her hands, her diamond ring scattering light across the table. That ring wasn't paid for, just like everything else in their lives. But in that moment, she carried herself like a queen, planting her flag on newly claimed ground. Finally, she said, reaching for her mimosa, I honestly thought he'd drag this out for months. I was already researching lawyers to have him declared mentally incompetent. But this is so much simpler. Did he say when the sale closes, Devin carved into his lobster, Benedict working through a slow bite before answering? He says next week, quick sale to an investment firm. That means cash Vanessa, liquid. Zillow has that house pegged at $1.5 million. Even if he takes 1.2 for a fast close, that is a serious windfall. They said nothing about my health. They didn't ask which facility I'd chosen. They didn't consider whether I was frightened or alone. Instead, Vanessa produced a napkin and a gold pen and began writing. Not a note of gratitude. Arithmetic. Let's be conservative. She set her eyes alive with something predatory. Say the net is $1 million after whatever small mortgage he has left. A decent nursing home runs about $6,000 a month. But why should we spring for decent? He doesn't need luxury. He needs a bed and a cafeteria. Devin flagged down the waiter for another round. Exactly. There's a state-subsidized place out in Salem. It's adequate. It's clean. Park him there, and the cost is almost nothing. That leaves the bulk of the equity sitting right where we need it. Vanessa drew a circle on the napkin. We can't wait for him to die, Devin. That could be another 20 years. The moment the sale clears, you get power of attorney over his accounts. Tell him you're managing his portfolio to keep him safe from scams. He trusts you. He's pathetic that way. I can see the whole scene in my mind, and it turns my blood to ice. What comes next is worse. They started spending the money. They burned through my life's work between bites of toast. First, the debts. Devin said, though, he waved his hand as if swatting something trivial. I'll retire the credit cards. That's maybe 40 grand nothing. But then, look at this babe. He brought up a listing on his phone. A brand new Range Rover, matte black red leather interior. I can't keep pulling up to the firm. In that 3-year-old BMW, he said. The partners notice. This says something. It's only $120,000. Put $50 down from Dad's money, and the monthly payments are manageable. Vanessa leaned across the table, scrolling her own screen. We're upgrading the Maldives trip. No more economy. We're going Emirates first class, and I want the water villa with the private slide. It's $10,000 a night. We've earned it. All this stress with your father has been exhausting. We need to breathe. She set down her phone and fixed her eyes on him. And Devin, the Chanel classic flap. You promised me. If this came through, you promised. The reseller has one for 12,000. It holds value better than gold, honestly. Devin took her hand and pressed it to his lips. Done. The second that money moves, I wire myself a management fee, and we go. They clinked their glasses together. To family, they said. They didn't mean me. They meant themselves, the glossy hollow version of a family they were performing for the room. Under the table, Devin's knee was bouncing. He checked his phone again, but this time it wasn't my message he was looking at. It was a bank notification. Insufficient funds. His card had been declined at the parking meter that morning. He swiped it away, jaw tightening for just a moment before the smile reassembled itself. Don't worry about the bill, he told Vanessa. I'll use the emergency card. We're set now. It's just a timing issue. They laughed together loudly and raucously, unaware that the waiter watching them was doing so with barely concealed contempt. They were toasting a victory that hadn't been won. They were carving up the spoils of a war they didn't know they'd already lost. Vanessa turned to look at the rain-slicked street outside. You know, she said, her voice wrapped in manufactured softness. I almost feel sorry for him. Leaving that house must be genuinely painful. All those years. Your mother's memory is in every room. Devin shrugged. He needs to move forward. He's been clinging to the past for too long. If anything, we're doing him a kindness, pushing him to let go. We're the ones looking out for him here. They actually believed it. That was the part that chilled me most. They had reconfigured reality so thoroughly that in their own accounting, stripping an old man of his home and depositing him in a state facility read as compassion. They finished their meal, leaving a wrecked table and an insultingly thin tip. Let's go to the dealership, Devin said, as they pushed back their chairs. Just to sit in it. Get the feel of it. Vanessa took his arm. And then the travel agent. I want to lock in those tickets today. I want the confirmation posted to Instagram tonight. Everyone needs to see that we are going to the Maldives. They pushed through the restaurant door and stepped over a puddle on the sidewalk, chins up, shoulders back. They looked like a power couple. They looked like people who had already won. What they didn't know was that across town, a courier was collecting a thick white envelope from the desk of Edmund Carver. What they didn't know was that the clock on everything they had built had already begun running down. They were mapping out a vacation when they should have been planning a memorial service for their lifestyle. The arrogance was acting as a blindfold, and I was depending on it. I needed them drunk on greed, so that when the ground gave way, it would shatter every bone in their financial bodies. 2 weeks had gone by since I gave Carver the order to assemble the legal guillotine. 2 weeks of complete silence from my side. No calls, no texts. I sat in my house, surrounded by 4 decades of a marriage lived inside these walls, and I waited. I knew they would come. Greed generates its own gravity, and this house was the sun they couldn't stop circling. They chose Thanksgiving for their visit. There was something almost poetic in the ugliness of that, a holiday built around gratitude being converted into a property assessment. I watched the Porsche nose into the driveway at 10 in the morning. I had written the check for that car, but as I watched Devin muscle the door shut, I understood I hadn't purchased the particular arrogance he carried out with him, that he had manufactured entirely on his own. Vanessa emerged next, sunglasses on, despite the flat gray Portland sky. She looked at the house, not with anything resembling warmth, but with the narrow-eyed calculation of a developer surveying a teardown. And then there was Finn. My grandson tumbled out of the back seat, clutching a plastic fire truck, the only uncorrupted thing within a 50-mile radius. I had the door open before they reached the step. I wanted to own the threshold. Finn spotted me, and his whole face ignited. "Grandpa!" he shouted, dropping the fire truck and launching himself toward me with both arms thrown wide. My chest, which I'd believed had calcified over the past 2 weeks, gave a little. I bent to receive him, but before Finn could close the distance, Vanessa's hand darted out. She snagged the collar of his jacket and pulled him back. "Finn, honey, no," she said, her voice carrying that sharpened sweetness she used for performance. "Don't throw yourself at Grandpa. Remember what we talked about. Grandpa is old and tired. You could hurt him, or catch something." I straightened up slowly, my joints registering the objection. I wasn't ill, I wasn't fragile. I had cycled 10 miles on the stationary bike that morning, but in their accounting, I was already a corpse still waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "Hello, Dad," Devin said, stepping past me into the hallway without offering a hand. He carried the scent of expensive cologne and poorly concealed nerves. His eyes moved through the living room in quick sweeps, tallying corners, cataloging signs of wear. "We brought a turkey," Vanessa said, sliding past me in his wake. "It's pre-cooked from Trader Joe's. We didn't want you wrestling with the oven. At your age, gas appliances can turn into a real hazard." She didn't pause for a response. She walked straight through to the dining room. I trailed after them, feeling less like a man in his own home, and more like a spirit drifting through rooms that no longer registered his presence. I had expected a family meal. Awkward talk about football or the rain. I was being naive. They hadn't driven over for lunch. They had come to stake a claim. Vanessa reached into her oversized bag and produced a stack of neon yellow Post-it notes. She peeled the first one free. The sound a crisp tearing zip cut across the silence of the house. She crossed to the mahogany sideboard, the one Miriam and I had shipped home from London 30 years ago. She pressed the yellow square onto the polished wood. On it, in thick black marker, she had printed a single word: keep. I stood at the kitchen island with my coffee going cold in my hand, watching this desecration proceed. I said nothing. I became the observer, the predator motionless in the tall grass, watching prey move through the field, unaware the wind had already shifted. "What are you doing, Vanessa?" I asked. My voice was level, flat. She didn't look up. She was already moving toward the china cabinet. Zip, another note. "Keep. Just getting organized, Warren," she said, breezy as a morning weather report. "Devin mentioned you're selling next week. We're helping you sort what has real value from what's just taking up space. You can't move all this heavy furniture into a nursing home. The rooms are tiny. There won't be room for any of it. So we're flagging what we're willing to relieve you of. Willing to relieve me of. As though they were performing a charity." Devin appeared from the living room, gripping a tape measure. He was sizing up the floor-to-ceiling windows. "These drapes have to come down," he muttered, half to himself, half making sure I'd hear. "They're dated. If we list this place or bring in tenants before we sell, we need the light. Open plan. That wall between the kitchen and dining room probably needs to go." He snapped the tape back into its case and looked at me. "Dad, did you hold on to the blueprints from the '95 renovation? I need to see which walls are load-bearing." Vanessa wants to open the flow for entertaining. I took another sip. The bitterness steadied me. "I thought the point was to sell the house and fund my care," I said. "Why does it matter which walls are load-bearing?" Devin produced a laugh, quick and dismissive, like brushing lint off a sleeve. "Well, right, eventually, but we should extract maximum value first. Maybe we hold it as a rental for a few years. Let the market move. You don't really understand these things, Dad. It's old school thinking. Let me manage the assets. You just focus on resting." Resting. That was their shorthand for dying. I watched Vanessa drift toward the fireplace. Above the mantel hung the oil painting of the Portland skyline, the one concealing my walls safe behind it. She studied it, tilting her head slowly. "This is ghastly," she announced. "Zip, sell." She pressed the note directly onto the canvas. A surge of heat moved through me, sharp and electric. I held it down. Not yet. The trap needed to be fully loaded before I sprung it. I needed to see exactly how far they intended to go. They moved through the house like a tide of locusts. Zip. Keep on the leather armchair. Zip. Trash on my library of engineering journals. Zip. Keep on the silver tea set Miriam had cherished. They didn't ask me a single question. Not one. Not, "Dad, does this chair carry any meaning for you?" Not, "Warren, would you want to hold on to this photo album?" In their working model, I had already ceased to be a person with a history or preferences. I was simply the obstacle standing between them and the inventory. Finn sat on the floor, pushing his fire truck back and forth along the baseboard. He looked up at me, his expression troubled, taking in the yellow squares multiplying across every surface like a rash. "Grandpa," he said quietly, "why is Mommy putting stickers on all your things?" I walked over and lowered myself to the floor beside him. My knees complained. I ignored them. I dropped my voice. "Because Finn," I said, smoothing his hair, "your mommy and daddy are playing a game. They believe they are out shopping." "Can I play?" Finn asked. "No," I told him gently. "This one's for grown-ups who have forgotten how to be decent. You keep hold of your fire truck. Fire trucks are honest. They show up when there's trouble. They don't show up with a turkey and a smile and then take the house." Vanessa came back into the room. She'd worked her way through to the master bedroom, my room, the one I hadn't allowed anyone to enter since Miriam died. "Devin, get in here," she called out. I rose and followed them down the hall. Vanessa was standing at Miriam's vanity. The jewelry box sat open on the surface. It had no lock. I'd never bothered, because I liked to lift the lid now and then and catch the trace of her perfume that still clung to the velvet lining. Vanessa was holding Miriam's pearl necklace against her throat, turning toward the mirror. "These are vintage," she said, and her voice had taken on that particular vibration greed produces. "Real saltwater pearls. This has to be worth 5,000 at least." "Put it down," I said. The room went still. It was the first direct order I had issued. Vanessa turned, irritation moving across her face in a quick flush. She did not put it down. She reached behind her neck and worked the clasp. "Oh, calm down, Warren. It's been sitting here collecting dust. Miriam would want someone to actually wear it, someone living, someone young. Leaving it shut in a dark room helps no one. I'm preserving it. Preserving it." Devin materialized in the doorway, reading the atmosphere. "Dad, she has a point. Mom's things, they're objects. We're going to place them in a safe deposit box. For the family, for the family." I looked at my son. I looked at the woman he had chosen. I looked at the yellow sticky notes now plastered all over my home. I realized then that it wasn't simple greed driving them. They were hollow, empty vessels trying to stuff themselves with things that weren't theirs, as if ownership could give them weight. I smiled. It was a cold, dry smile. "You know what I told them? You're right. It's just stuff. Take it. Take whatever you want. Go ahead and mark it all." Vanessa's eyes went wide. "Really, really," I said. "Because come Monday, none of this would mean a thing." They took that as capitulation. They figured I'd finally resigned myself to my role as the doddering old man. What they didn't understand was that I was smiling because I was holding a card they didn't know existed. I knew that the demand letter was sitting right now in a sorting facility at the downtown post office. I knew that within 48 hours the sheriff would be hunting for assets to seize, and every single item they were flagging with a yellow keep sticker was about to become Exhibit A in a bankruptcy hearing. "Go ahead," I said, waving a hand at the house. "Make yourselves comfortable. Enjoy the tour." I turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving them to their inventory. Back in the kitchen, I poured myself another cup of coffee. I watched Finn playing on the floor. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the author of the final chapter, and I was simply giving the villains enough rope to hang themselves before I shut the book. The house had gone quiet again, broken only by the zip, zip, zip of those yellow notes. It sounded like a clock ticking down, and I was the only person in the room who knew when it would go off. We sat down at the dining room table, a slab of mahogany that had held 30 years of laughter arguments and raised glasses. Today it hosted a crime scene. The pre-cooked turkey from Trader Joe's sat in the center looking pale and dry. Vanessa hadn't bothered with a platter. She'd peeled back the aluminum foil and set the plastic container straight on the heat-resistant pad. A perfect metaphor for the whole relationship. Convenient, stripped of warmth, and purely transactional. Finn was the only one eating with any real enthusiasm. He was mashing his potatoes with his fork, humming softly to himself. I watched him and wished I could shrink the world down to just that chair and that boy let the rest of the room dissolve away, but I couldn't. I had to see the scene through. Devin cleared his throat. It was the sound of a salesman revving his engine. He filled his wine glass nearly to the rim, but didn't reach over to pour any for me. "So, Dad," he began, leaning back with a rehearsed casualness that made my skin crawl. "We need to talk logistics. If you're serious about a facility, time is money. The market's shifting. Interest rates are climbing. You don't want this place sitting unsold for months." I cut a piece of the dry turkey. It tasted like sawdust. I chewed slowly, making him wait. "I'm listening," I said. Devin shot a quick look at Vanessa. It was the look of two people who had rehearsed their lines on the drive over. "I took the liberty of running the comps in the neighborhood," Devin said. "The Miller house down the street went for $1.3 million, but that had a renovated kitchen. Yours is, well, it's 90s chic, but the lot size is solid. I think if we list aggressively at 1.2, we can get a bidding war going." I repeated quietly. Devin smiled that slick, polished smile he probably aimed at first-time buyers who didn't know any better. "Well, yes, I'm a licensed broker, Dad. It only makes sense for me to handle the listing. Why hand 3% to a stranger when it stays in the family? I'll drop my fee to 2%. That's $12,000 back in your pocket right there. Plus, I can oversee the contractors for staging. Vanessa has a real eye for it." Vanessa jumped in, gesturing toward the window with her fork. "We need to declutter right away. That's the whole point of the tagging. All this heavy furniture makes the rooms feel cramped. We'll need a storage unit, clear everything out. Paint the walls, a clean white, bring in modern staging pieces." It'll make the space red bigger, fresher. I glanced at the yellow sticky note on the sideboard. Keep. I looked at the one on the china cabinet. Keep. So I said, let me make sure I understand. You want me to move out, pay you to sell my house, and rent a storage unit for furniture you've already claimed for yourselves. Devin set down his wine glass with a frown. You're twisting my words. We're trying to maximize your equity. This is your nest egg, Dad. We want you to get every dollar out of it. And what happens to the money after the sale, I asked. Devin shrugged. It goes into a managed account. I can handle that side of it too. We'll put together a conservative portfolio bonds index fund, something steady. Draw a monthly allowance for your care costs, let the rest grow. Grow for whom I asked. For you, Devin said, his voice edging up. For your future. I set my fork down. The metal rang against the china, a sharp little punctuation mark. I wiped my mouth with the napkin. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the desperation he was keeping just behind his eyes. I saw the debts he wasn't mentioning. I saw the house of cards he'd built, and the way he was eyeing my home as the one thing that could hold it together. You can stop the pitch, Devin, I said, steady and calm. You don't need to list the house. Devin blinked. What do you mean you can't go for sale by owner? You'll get taken. You don't know the paperwork. I didn't say I was selling it myself, I replied. I said you don't need to list it because it's already sold. The silence that followed was total, heavy and thick like the air before a thunderstorm breaks. Vanessa froze with her glass halfway to her lips. Devin's jaw actually dropped. What Devin whispered. I took a sip of water. I signed the papers yesterday morning. I lied. A private investment firm. They buy properties for cash as is. No inspections, no staging, no freshly painted white walls. They made me a flat offer and I accepted. We close Monday. Devin's face went a shade of red I'd never seen on him before. Not embarrassment, fury. You sold the house without talking to me. For how much market value? I said vaguely. Enough to cover what I need. Vanessa slammed her glass down. Wine spread across the tablecloth. Who is the buyer? She demanded. What's the name of the firm? We need to see that contract. You probably got robbed. You're an old man, Warren. People prey on seniors. You could have walked away hundreds of thousands short. I'm not senile, Vanessa, I said, my voice going hard. I was negotiating multi-million-dollar infrastructure contracts while you were still learning to color inside the lines. The deal is done. The money is wired. It's finished. Devin shoved back from the table, his chair screeching across the floor. You can't do that, he shouted. This is a family asset. This is my inheritance. You can't just liquidate it without talking to me first. I am your son. I looked up at him unmoved. I thought you had your own life, Devin. I thought you had your own family. Isn't that what you texted me? You told me to sell the house. You told me not to be a burden. I'm doing exactly what you asked. I am liquidating my assets to pay for my own care, so I will never have to ask you for a single dime. Why are you upset? You should be relieved. You're off the hook. But the money, Devin sputtered. Where's it going? I leaned forward. That is none of your business. The same way my care is none of your business. Vanessa was on her feet now, her face twisted and ugly. She leveled a manicured finger at me. You did this on purpose, she hissed. You knew we needed that commission. You knew we were counting on managing that equity. You selfish old bastard. You sold it behind our backs just to spite us. I looked at Finn. He had stopped eating. He was shrinking into his chair, eyes darting from his father to his mother, frightened. Stop yelling, I said, quiet and flat and dangerous. You're scaring the boy. I don't care, Vanessa screamed. What about the furniture? What about the pearls? What about everything we tagged? The contract is for the house. The contents are still ours. I rose slowly. I picked up the yellow sticky note from the sideboard. I crumpled it in my fist. Actually, I said part of the deal included a vacancy clause. The house has to be empty by Monday. What comes next is the moment I'd been quietly building toward for longer than anyone knew. And before I take you there, I want to ask you something. If someone close to you had been working against you the entire time, would your first move be to confront them head on, or would you gather every piece of proof first and let the truth do the work? I hired a junk removal service. They're coming tomorrow. Junk removal. Devin looked like he was about to have a stroke. That's a $5,000 dining table. I know, I said. I bought it. And since I can't bring it to a nursing home, and since you have your own life and your own furniture, I donated it. All of it. The furniture, the silver, the books. Every bit of it is going to Goodwill. They're picking it up at 8:00 a.m. The tax write-off will be considerable. Vanessa made a sound that was half scream, half sob. The pearls. What about the pearls? I donated those to a battered women's shelter auction, I said. I thought it was appropriate. Miriam would have wanted them used to help women trying to get out of bad situations. You gave away Mom's pearls, Devin whispered, staring at me with undisguised hatred. You are sick. You are a sick, bitter old man. I didn't flinch. I walked around the table and took my place at the head of it, gripping the back of the chair. Get out, I said. Devin stared at me, stunned. What, get out of my house? I said again. Take your cold turkey, take your yellow sticky notes, and go. You came here to appraise me like a used car. You came here to strip the copper from the walls before the body was even cold. Well, the sale is done. The shop is closed. Get out. Devin squared his shoulders, trying to loom over me. I was 65, but I had spent my working life on construction sites. I had faced down union bosses and corrupt inspectors. A soft-handed real estate broker in a leased suit wasn't going to rattle me. This isn't over, Dad, he spat. I will contest this. I'll find a lawyer. I'll prove you are mentally incompetent and get the sale reversed. You won't see a cent of that money. I laughed. A genuine laugh this time. Go right ahead, Devin. Get yourself a lawyer. I strongly recommend you find a very good one. You are going to need him come Monday. He didn't catch my meaning. He thought I was bluffing about the sale. He had no idea that the real lawyer he needed wasn't there to contest a real estate transaction, but to defend against a foreclosure. Vanessa snatched up her bag. Come on, Devin, let's go. He's lost his mind. We'll call Dr. Evans. We'll have him committed. And we are taking the pearls, by the way. She reached toward her own neck, but I brought my hand down hard on the table. The silverware jumped. You walk out that door with those pearls. Vanessa and I will call the police and report a theft, and I will press charges. Do you want a criminal record on top of everything else? She went still. She looked into my eyes and understood I wasn't bluffing. Shaking with rage, she unclasped the necklace and flung it onto the table. It landed with a soft clatter beside the untouched turkey. I hope you rot in that nursing home, she spat. I hope you die alone. I picked up the pearls and slipped them into my pocket. I already am alone, Vanessa. I've been alone since the day Miriam died. Having the two of you circling overhead didn't ease the loneliness. It just wore me out. Devin grabbed Finn's arm and hauled him roughly off his chair. We are leaving Finn. Don't say goodbye to Grandpa. He doesn't love us. Finn looked back at me. Tears were running down his face. Everything in me wanted to cross that room and hold him. I wanted to tell him that I loved him more than anything on this earth, and that every move I was making was to make sure he never became the man who was dragging him out the door. But I held my ground. I had to be the villain in their story if I was ever going to be the hero in his future. I watched them storm out. The front door slammed so hard the windows shook in their frames. I heard the Porsche engine roar to life, a furious mechanical scream. Then silence settled back in. I looked around the dining room. The yellow note still clung to everything, bright little flags of greed. I crossed to the sideboard and peeled off the one that said, "Keep." I crumpled it and dropped it onto the half-eaten turkey. I wasn't going to a nursing home. I wasn't selling the house. And I was absolutely not losing my mind. I was just a father who had finally stopped lying down and letting people walk over him. I sat back down at the head of the table. I poured myself a glass of the wine Devin had opened. It was a cheap blend, sharp, acidic, and harsh. I drank it anyway. Monday, I murmured to the empty room. Monday is coming. I checked my watch. The courier would be delivering the demand letter to Devin's office at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday morning. They thought they'd lost an inheritance today. They had no idea they were about to lose their freedom. The news about the house was just the opening move. The real blow hadn't landed yet, and I, Warren Hartwell, was keeping my fist clenched and ready. Monday morning came in with the aggressive brightness of a day that had no sympathy for anyone's weekend. In the glass-walled offices of Wexford and Finch Real Estate, the air conditioner droned its low, expensive note. Devin Hartwell sat in his ergonomic chair, the one that cost more than my first car, and surveyed his kingdom. He had on a new suit, a navy Italian cut he'd put on a credit card that was already $3,000 past its limit. But that didn't trouble him. In his head, the wire transfer from the sale of my house was right around the corner. He was simply borrowing against a future he considered locked in. He took a sip of his black Americano and scrolled through his calendar. He had a lunch meeting with a developer at noon. He planned to order the most expensive thing on the menu and drop hints about coming into significant family capital. That was how the game was played. Fake it until you make it, then keep faking so nobody notices there's nothing underneath. At 9:15, the receptionist, a young woman named Audrey, who Devin had been trying to impress for months, knocked on his glass door. She looked uneasy. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "there's a courier here for you. He says it's urgent legal correspondence. He needs a signature." Devin smiled. He actually smiled. He rose from his chair, buttoning his jacket with a small flourish. He was certain it was the paperwork on the house sale. He thought I had completely given in and was sending him documents to manage the funds. "Send him in, Audrey," he said. His voice pitched low and commanding. The courier was a compact man in a gray uniform carrying a thick white envelope with a red stripe down the side. He was not the least bit impressed by Devin's suit or the city view. He simply held out a digital pad. "Sign here," the man said. Devin scrawled his signature, that arrogant looping scrawl he had been perfecting since high school. He took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt significant. "Thank you, my good man," Devin said, setting it casually on his desk. Once the courier left and the door clicked shut, he went for it the way a child tears into a gift on Christmas morning. He grabbed his letter opener, a brass letter opener shaped like a sword, and sliced open the top. He pulled out the stack of papers inside. The first thing his eyes landed on was the letterhead. Carver and Associates. He smirked. He knew Carver. That was my old friend, the lawyer who used to come to our backyard barbecues. Devin probably assumed Edmund Carver was simply handling the transfer of assets. He unfolded the cover letter and began to read, and as the words registered, the air seemed to leave the room. The hum of the air conditioner went silent. The noise of the city outside fell away. The only sound left in the world was the blood pounding in his ears, a roaring, rushing tide of panic. "Redemand for immediate payment of outstanding promissory notes." Devin blinked. He shook his head, convinced his eyes were playing tricks. He read the next line. "Dear Mr. Hartwell, this firm represents your creditor, Mr. Warren Hartwell. We are writing to formally notify you that Mr. Hartwell is exercising his right under Clause 4, Section B of the attached promissory notes to accelerate the debt and demand full repayment." Devin's hands began to tremble. The paper rattled a dry, crackling sound that was impossibly loud in the still office. He dropped back into his chair, his legs no longer able to hold him. He turned the page. There was a table, a spreadsheet. Date October 12th, 2013. Item Porsche Cayenne purchase. Amount $80,000. Status unpaid. Date June 5th, 2015. Item wedding expenses. Amount $150,000. Status unpaid. Date January 10th, 2022. Item personal loan. Amount $50,000. Status unpaid. His eyes dragged down the column, past dates he'd let slip from memory, past amounts he had treated as gifts, past the recollection of me pressing checks into his hands while he smiled and swore he'd make it right someday. He reached the bottom line, the total $480,500. Devin stared at the number. It sat on the white page like a coiled snake, perfectly still and ready to strike. $482,500. It wasn't just a number. It was a death sentence. He couldn't draw a breath. He pulled at his tie, fingers fumbling with the silk knot. His chest felt like something was sitting on it, the sudden crushing weight of reality bearing down all at once. He didn't have $400,000. He didn't have $40,000. He had $12 in his checking account and a wallet stuffed with maxed out plastic. He read the next paragraph. "You have 30 calendar days from receipt of this letter to remit the total amount in certified funds. Failure to comply will result in the immediate filing of a lawsuit, a motion for summary judgment, and the subsequent seizure of assets, including, but not limited to, real estate vehicles and garnishment of wages." Seizure of assets. Garnishment of wages. Devin looked around his office. He thought about the lease on the BMW sitting in the parking garage. He thought about the penthouse he was renting. He thought about his career, which was built entirely on the appearance of success. If his wages were garnished, if his car got repossessed in front of the building, if his own father sued him in open court, it was finished. The partners would show him the door. The developer he was meeting for lunch would laugh in his face. Vanessa would leave him. Vanessa. Oh God, Vanessa. He grabbed his phone. His fingers were slick with sweat. He unlocked it and dialed my number. He didn't stop to consider what time it was. He didn't think about the last conversation we'd had when he'd told me to get out of my own home. He just reacted a drowning man throwing himself at a piece of driftwood. The phone rang, 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. Pick up. Pick up! Pick up! You old bastard, Devin hissed through clenched teeth, rocking in his expensive chair. On the 4th ring, the line opened. No greeting, no hello, just silence. Dad. Devin's voice broke apart. It was thin and high, the voice of a frightened child. Dad, I just got this letter. What the hell is this? I let a beat pass before I answered. I was out on my porch watching the rain come down, holding a cup of tea. Hello, Devin, I said. My voice was steady, the same tone I used when I was inspecting a crack in a foundation. Is this a joke? Devin demanded, clawing back a scrap of anger. Is this some kind of sick joke? $400? Have you lost your mind? You gave me that money. I loaned you that money. I corrected him, keeping my voice even. And you signed for it. Did you read the attachments, Devin? The ones with your signature on them? I didn't think you were being serious, Devin shouted. Nobody does that to their own kid. You can't call in a decade of loans in a single day. I don't have that kind of money. I know you don't, I said. That's why I gave you 30 days. You're a resourceful young man. You have your own life, your own family. I'm sure you'll find a way. Dad, please. Devin begged, his voice fracturing again. You have to stop this. Carver is out of his mind. This will destroy me. If this goes to court, I lose my license. I lose everything. You should have considered that. When you told me to sell my house and move into a state facility, I said, you wanted a transaction, Devin. You wanted to treat our relationship like a business arrangement. Well, this is business, and the audit is long overdue. Dad, I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I'm sorry about the text. Just tell Carver to pull the letter. I took a sip of my tea. The rain was lovely today. I can't do that, son, I said. The letter is already in the system. The clock is running. You have 29 days and 23 hours left. I'd suggest you stop shouting at me and start looking for a second income. But, Dad, goodbye, Devin. I ended the call. I didn't throw the phone down. I just pressed the red button. I could picture him sitting in his glass-walled office holding the dead phone, surrounded by the rubble of his own arrogance. I could picture the panic clawing its way up his throat. For the first time in his adult life, my son was staring down a problem that my checkbook wasn't going to solve. In fact, my checkbook was the one holding the gun. A twinge of sadness moved through me, deep and quiet, but I let it go. A surgeon can't weep while he's cutting out a tumor. He has to be steady. He has to be precise. And I had a great deal more cutting ahead of me. Gravity is a funny thing. You rarely notice it until the floor drops out from under you. For my son Devin, the floor didn't just vanish. It was yanked away by a court order bearing the stamp of a judge who had no interest in unpaid debts. I wasn't there to witness it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the timeline. I knew that at 9 in the morning, Carver had filed the ex parte writ of attachment. I knew that by noon, the electronic reach of the legal system would have extended into every financial institution in the state. And I knew that by 1:00, Devin would be sitting across from a client he couldn't afford to lose, trying to pay with money he no longer had access to. The restaurant was Le Marais. It was the kind of place where the napkins were linen, thick enough to pass for bedsheets, and the waitstaff spoke in low, reverent tones that made you feel like you'd walked into a library. Devin was dining with Mr. Wexford, a developer who was looking for a broker to move 20 luxury condos. This was the deal that was supposed to rescue Devin's year. This was the commission that was meant to cover the gambling debts he assumed I knew nothing about. I can picture the scene without any effort. Devin was probably leaning back in his chair, swirling a glass of Pinot Noir, laughing a little too hard at Mr. Wexford's jokes. He was projecting confidence. He was the successful heir to the Hartwell name. He probably ordered the Wagyu beef. He probably insisted on picking up the check. And then the check arrived. Devin would have reached into his jacket, drawn out his sleek black card holder, and selected his platinum card, the one with the high limit, and set it on the silver tray with a casual flick of his wrist. "It's on me," he would have said. A small gesture of goodwill for our future partnership. The waiter would have taken the tray and moved away. Devin would have kept talking, maybe glancing at his watch, maybe mentally rehearsing the test drive he had scheduled later for the Range Rover. 5 minutes later, the waiter came back. He wasn't carrying a receipt. He was holding the card between 2 fingers, the way you'd handle something you'd found on the floor of a subway car. "I'm sorry, sir," the waiter would have said, his voice dropping to that polished, devastating murmur. The card was declined. Devin laughed. It was a nervous, disbelieving laugh. "That's impossible," he said. "Run it again." "It's probably the chip. It's been giving me trouble." "I ran it 3 times, sir." The waiter replied, his expression a careful mask of professional sympathy. "The system says, do not honor, do not honor." 3 words that can strip a man of his dignity faster than a slap across the face. Devin's smile began to slip. He could feel Mr. Wexford watching him. The developer wasn't saying a word, but his eyes were narrowing. In high-stakes real estate, a broker who can't cover lunch certainly can't move $20 million in inventory. "Here, try this one." Devin said, his palms damp now, as he fished out his backup card, the gold one. The waiter took it, walked away, and returned 2 minutes later. "I'm afraid this one is declined as well, sir." The room tilted. The air conditioning seemed to cut out. Sweat prickled at Devin's hairline. This wasn't a technical glitch. This was a blockade. I don't understand," Devin stammered. "I just used it this morning." He looked at Mr. Wexford. The older man was already reaching for his own wallet, his expression no longer cordial. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd spent 2 hours on someone who wasn't what he claimed to be. "Put it away, Devin," Mr. Wexford said coldly, tossing his corporate card onto the table. "I'll cover it. But I think we're done here. My partners need someone with a stable operation." "Wait, let me call my bank," Devin said, half rising from his chair. "Don't bother," Wexford said, already buttoning his jacket as he stood. No handshake. He simply walked out, leaving Devin alone at the table with 2 declined cards and a half-eaten steak that was suddenly very difficult to get down. Devin pushed out of the restaurant, oblivious to the looks from other diners. He pulled up his banking app and tried to log in. "Access denied. Please contact your branch." He jabbed at the screen. He tried his savings account. "Access denied." He tried the joint account he held with Vanessa. "Access denied." He stood on the sidewalk in the middle of the downtown Portland lunch crowd and felt a cold wind cut straight through his expensive suit. He wasn't just broke, he was frozen. Digitally erased from the economy, he called the bank. He screamed at the automated system until a human being picked up. "Sir," the representative said, measured and calm. "I'm seeing a garnishment order and a full asset freeze placed by the sheriff's department based on a filing from, let me pull this up, Carver and Associates. We are legally obligated to lock all accounts tied to your social security number." "My dad," Devin whispered. He actually did it. He hung up. He needed to get home. He needed to find Vanessa. He needed to work out a plan. He ran to the parking garage where he kept his leased BMW. But the nightmare was only shifting gears. When he pulled up to his luxury apartment complex, there was no valet waiting. Instead, a flatbed tow truck sat blocking the entrance, a big, ugly machine idling with a loud diesel rattle pumping exhaust into the midday air. And strapped to the back of it, hooked by its rear bumper, was his BMW. "Wait!" Devin screamed, sprinting toward the truck. "Stop! That's my car!" He reached the driver's door just as the truck began rolling forward. He hammered on the glass. The driver, a large man with a heavy beard and the eyes of someone who had watched 1,000 desperate people, cracked the window an inch. "Step away from the truck, pal," the driver said. "You can't take this," Devin shouted. "I leased this. It's not even technically mine." "Yeah, and the leasing company received a notice of default and a repo order about an hour ago," the driver said, sounding thoroughly bored. "Something about a lien holder exercising rights. You want to argue it, call the bank. Now back up before you lose a foot." Devin stood helplessly as the truck swung into traffic, hauling his status symbol away. The BMW's alarm was going off in short, mournful chirps, a digital cry for help that nobody was coming to answer. Then he heard the screaming, not the car alarm. Vanessa. She was standing inside the lobby of the building, surrounded by 3 of their neighbors. She had on her yoga clothes, was clutching her yoga mat, and looked like she was one breath away from detonating. "Devin!" she shrieked the moment she spotted him. She burst through the automatic doors, not caring in the slightest that she was causing a scene. "What is happening?" she screamed, shoving her phone into his face. "I tried to pay for my Pilates class, and they cut up my card. I tried to buy a smoothie, and it was declined. And now, the concierge is telling me our key fobs for the elevator have been deactivated because the rent check bounced." Devin looked at his wife. He didn't see a partner. He saw his own panic reflected back at him, at twice the intensity with none of the sympathy. "It's my dad," Devin whispered. He froze everything. Vanessa stared at him. Her eyes went wide, then sharpened into slits of pure fury. You told me he was bluffing? She yelled, hitting him across the chest with her yoga mat. You told me he was a weak old man. You said we had 30 days. He accelerated the debt, Devin said, his voice unsteady. It's a legal mechanism. He didn't have to wait. Well, fix it, Vanessa screamed. Fix it right now. I have a hair appointment at 3. I have friends coming over tonight. I cannot get into my own apartment. People around them had stopped to watch. The doorman was looking off to the side, pretending not to notice. The neighbors were whispering. This was the couple who swept through the lobby, like they owned every square foot of it. The couple who complained if the flower arrangement wasn't fresh enough. Now, they were out on the sidewalk, locked out penniless and tearing into each other. I can't fix it, Devin said, tears beginning to surface. He took everything. The accounts are locked. The car is gone. Vanessa took a step back. She looked him over with a blend of revulsion and dread. So, we have nothing, she asked. We have nothing, Devin admitted. She didn't reach for him. She didn't offer a word of comfort or tell him they'd get through it. She looked at his empty hands and his panicked face, and she ran the numbers. I'm going to my mother's, she said, her voice flat and cold. Vanessa, wait, Devin said, reaching for her arm. Don't touch me, she snapped. You are a loser, Devin. You promised me a lifestyle. You promised me the Maldives. And now you can't even buy me a smoothie. Don't call me until you've got your money back. She turned on her heel and flagged down a taxi. She got in. Devin watched it pull away. It occurred to him then that she didn't even have cash for the fare. She'd probably have her mother waiting at the curb with money. She would be fine. She always found a way to land on her feet. Devin stood alone outside a building he could no longer walk into. It started to rain again. He reached into his pocket to call an Uber, then stopped. His app was linked to his card. His card was dead. No car, no cash, no credit, no wife, no way through his own front door. He sat down on the curb, oblivious to the wet concrete seeping through his Italian suit pants. He dropped his head into his hands. Across the city in my dry and quiet study, I poured myself another cup of tea. I didn't have to watch him sitting there to know that the lesson had started. I had stripped away the insulation. I had pulled back the layer of money that cushions a person from the world's hard edges. For the first time in 32 years, Devin was feeling the cold. I looked at the phone and waited. I knew he wouldn't call yet. He was still in shock, still in the denial stage. But soon enough, the hunger would arrive. Soon the reality of sleeping on a park bench or begging a friend for their couch would stop being abstract. I took a sip of tea. It was English breakfast, my favorite. The collapse was complete. Now came the wait to see whether there was anything underneath the wreckage worth salvaging, or whether my son was hollow all the way through. The hallway of the luxury apartment complex was silent, lined with thick carpet that carried the scent of lavender and money. It was the kind of silence that usually meant comfort, but for Devin and Vanessa, standing outside door 42, it was the silence of a sealed tomb. They had managed to slip inside by following a delivery driver through the entrance, a small, sad triumph that felt pitiful the instant they reached their own front door. The electronic lock blinked red, a small, unblinking eye of judgment. Devin pressed his key fob to the sensor again. Nothing. No beep, no mechanical click of the deadbolt releasing. Just that cold, accusatory red light. He leaned his forehead against the door. He looked utterly spent. The adrenaline from the restaurant and the tow truck had burned away, leaving behind a hollow, trembling fear. Vanessa, standing beside him, wasn't trembling. She was vibrating at a frequency that could crack glass. She stood with her arms folded, her yoga mat tucked under one arm, like a weapon staring at the back of her husband's head, as though calculating exactly where to insert the blade. "Open the door, Devin," she said, not loud a hiss. "I can't," Devin murmured against the wood. The management company must have cut the access remotely. The rent check bounced Vanessa. The lease is in default. Then kick it down, she said. Devin turned around slowly, looking at her, the way you look at someone speaking a language you've never heard. Kick it down. Vanessa, this is a solid oak door with a steel core, and there are cameras on every inch of this hallway. Do you want breaking and entering added to the list of lawsuits my father is already filing against me? Vanessa let her yoga mat drop. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. She moved closer, crowding into his space, her eyes wild. I don't care about lawsuits, Devin. I care about my things. My jewelry is in there. My clothes are in there. My life is in that apartment. Get me inside. I can't, Devin shouted, his voice cracking. The sound bounced off the walls and rolled down the long hallway. A door swung open. The elderly widow from 405 looked out, glanced at Devin, then at Vanessa, and silently pulled her door shut again. The lock clicked, the sound of someone choosing to exclude themselves. "See what you did," Vanessa sneered. "You are humiliating us again." Devin slid down the door until he was sitting on the floor, knees pulled to his chest, ruining the sharp crease in his Italian trousers. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to crawl under the dining room table whenever thunder rattled the house. But there was no table to hide beneath now, and this storm had been built entirely by his own hands. "Vanessa, please," he said, looking up at her. "I need you to be on my team right now. We can work through this. Head over to your mom's place, regroup, and I'll straighten it out. I'll get back in front of Dad. I'll get down on my knees if that's what it takes." Vanessa let out a laugh, short, dry, nothing warm in it at all. "Your team," she said. "That's what you want, Devin me on your team. Take a good look at yourself right now, parked on a hallway floor, no car waiting downstairs, not a dollar to your name. Credit cards worth less than the plastic they're printed on. You don't have a team. You are dead weight." "That's not how any of this happened," Devin said. "Everything you asked for, I delivered. Paris, the car, the ring, every bit of it." Vanessa's composure finally cracked. "Those things came straight from your father's wallet," she snapped, starting to move back and forth in the narrow corridor, hands flying. "I didn't walk down the aisle for you, Devin. I walked down it for what you were supposed to become, the Hartwell heir. You sat me down and told me your father was flush. You said he was old and disengaged. You said stepping in to run his affairs was basically a rubber stamp. I believed that Devin started. You believed." Vanessa shot back, her voice dripping contempt. 32 years old. Believing isn't good enough at your age. You should have had the power of attorney sewn up years back. Instead, you were out there performing for your friends, playing the big man, while the actual work of locking this down went undone. Securing the bag, that was her phrase for it. That's what my decades of building something amounted to in her mind, a bag to be grabbed. "I loved you," Devin said, voice going quiet. "I thought you felt the same." Vanessa stopped moving. She looked down at him. Something shifted in her expression. Not warmth, not remorse. Pity. The flat, impersonal kind you'd feel passing a stray dog that had been clipped by a car. "Unfortunate, but you're not touching it." "Devin," she said, exhaling slowly, "what I loved was the shape of the life in front of us, the version where things went right. But love can't survive on air. It needs ground under it. A man who can't get through his own front door isn't someone I can build on." Her hand went into her purse. For a half-second, Devin's face said he thought maybe she was digging for something to comfort him. She came out with her phone. "Calling an Uber," she announced. "Mom will settle the fare when I land." "So that's it, you're walking," Devin said, the panic climbing back into his voice. "Where exactly do I go?" "Not my department," Vanessa said, eyes on the screen. "You could always show up at your father's door, right? Except you set that on fire, didn't you?" She glanced at the display. 7 minutes. She posted herself against the far wall, maximum distance between them without actually stepping away. A full minute passed. Neither spoke. The lock blinked its small red pulse. Blink, blink, blink. "You want to talk about blame?" Devin said, something sharpening in his voice. "This falls on you too. The penthouse was your idea. The Maldives was your idea. Every dollar I pulled from my father, you were right beside me, spending it." Vanessa raised her eyes from the phone, cold and flat, like something that lives at the bottom of the ocean. "But my signature isn't anywhere on those notes, is it?" she said almost gently. Devin went rigid. "I never put my name on a single promissory note, Devin." She continued, the smile thin and deliberate. "Give your father credit, he was thorough. You, on the other hand, signed whatever he put in front of you. The car loan, the wedding money, the business advance, every line, all yours. I'm just the wife. But if I get the divorce filing in before the bankruptcy is official, I can make the case that I had no knowledge of the financial misconduct. I step out of the blast radius entirely." Devin just stared. The air went right out of him. He saw it clearly. Now she hadn't been living their life. She'd been constructing a trapdoor the whole time. The spending was never reckless. It was strategic. "Tell me you won't do that," he said, barely above a whisper. "Already doing it," she replied. Her phone chimed. "Driver's outside." She came off the wall, not one glance at the apartment door, not one look at everything sealed behind it. She straightened her coat and moved toward the elevator. Vanessa. Devin called out after her. "Vanessa, don't do this." She kept walking. She hit the elevator button. The doors came apart immediately, almost like the building had been holding them open. She stepped in, turned, and for just a moment, their eyes connected across the hallway. Devin on the floor, suit beyond saving. Vanessa upright in the elevator, already somewhere else in her head. "Best of luck, Devin," she said. "Hope the park benches are comfortable this time of year." The doors closed. Gone. He stayed on that floor a long time. The hallway's quiet came back, but it had a different character, now denser, heavier, something sitting on his chest. He stared at that red blink on the lock. Still going. Keeping him out. Keeping the truth locked safely in. The house gone. The car gone. His wife gone. He dug his phone out of his pocket. 12% battery. He pulled up his contacts. Thumb past the friends he drank with. Past the business connections who'd stopped returning calls. Past Vanessa's name. His thumb found mine. Dad. He tapped it. It rang. Once. Twice. I was in my study with the rain against the glass. His name sat there on the screen, and I knew exactly which hallway floor he was on. I knew exactly which set of heels had just walked away from him. I let it keep ringing. "Not yet, son," I said quietly to no one. "You're not there yet. You're still scanning the horizon for someone to come and haul you out. That's not where you need to be. You need the bottom first, the cold, hard concrete of it." I hit decline. Down the hall of that locked-up apartment building, Devin heard it roll to voicemail. He didn't record a message. He let the phone slip from his fingers onto the carpet and pulled his knees up to his chest and hid his face in his arms. Then, for the first time since boyhood, my son wept. Not the hot, indignant tears of a man who thinks he's been wronged. The other kind, deep, ragged, the kind that only comes when a person finally understands they are entirely on their own. Desperation has a smell to it. Stale coffee, cheap cologne, the cold bite of fear sweat. That smell met me at the door of the settlement conference room at the county courthouse 3 days on. I had no obligation to be there. Carver said I was free to sit this one out and let him manage the proceedings, but I wasn't staying home. I had to know whether my son had discovered what humility felt like yet, or whether he was still running the same bluff on a busted hand. He was still running it. Devin occupied one side of the battered wooden table. The state of him was rough, unwashed hair, eyes raw at the rims, a suit so creased it was obvious he'd been sleeping in it. His attorney sat beside him. Not a partner from any reputable downtown firm. A man named Mr. Dunlap, the kind whose photo probably appears on the back of a bus bench above the words DUI and slip and fall. Dunlap's suit was a full-size large, and he hadn't stopped drumming his pen against a legal pad that showed almost no writing. Carver and I settled into our chairs across the table. Carver set a single fat file folder down. The weight of it hitting the wood rang out like a gavel striking the bench. Dunlap cleared his throat and did his best to look composed, but his eyes kept sliding over toward Carver's briefcase. "Gentlemen," he started, voice reedy. "We are filing a countersuit against Mr. Warren Hartwell on grounds of fraud, undue influence, and predatory lending practices against a family member. It is my client's position that the funds transferred to him across the last 10 years constituted gifts understood by both parties within the natural context of a father-son relationship to carry no obligation of repayment. The promissory notes were executed under duress without independent legal counsel, and we are seeking to have the debt voided entirely." Devin bobbed his head hard. "Right. You manipulated me into signing Dad. You said those documents were just internal bookkeeping. You were never going to call them in, and we both knew it. That's fraud." I studied my son across that table. He was lunging at anything within reach, bending the story of his own life until it fit a shape where he was the victim. He genuinely believed that volume and conviction could alter facts. Carver said nothing. No objection, no raised voice, no visible reaction at all. He opened the file folder and pushed a single sheet across the table to Mr. Dunlap. "Exhibit A." Carver said, level and quiet. An email dated June 12, 2015. Sender, Devin Hartwell. Recipient, Warren Hartwell. Subject line, the wedding. Dunlap shifted his glasses up his nose. "Read the highlighted section aloud, please," Carver said. Dunlap's voice lost some of its steadiness as he read. "Dad, I know asking for $150,000 is a lot, but Vanessa really wants this vineyard venue. I swear to you, this is a loan. I will pay you back every cent once I get my commission from the Towers project. My word is my bond. Hand me whatever needs a signature, and let's make it binding." Carver pushed another sheet across the table. Exhibit B. He kept going. A text message chain from October 2013. On the subject of the Porsche. Devin writes, I don't want a handout, Dad. I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Treat this car as an investment in my image. I will repay the principal plus interest. I want to do this the right way. Carver pressed his palms together and leaned in. 47 pages of digital correspondence, Mr. Dunlap. Every single time money moved between these two parties, your client put it in writing that he planned to pay it back. He used words like loan investment debt. The word gift never appears, not a single time. The color drained from Devin's face. He slid down in his seat. He had forgotten. He had forgotten every promise he'd made in those desperate cash-starved moments. He had forgotten that what goes on the internet stays on the internet, carved in stone, not scratched in sand. Dunlap's gaze dropped to the documents. Then it moved to Devin. It wasn't a sympathetic look. It was the look of a man who has just understood he was handed a losing hand and wasn't told. You swore to me there was nothing on paper, Dunlap hissed through his teeth. You said every conversation was verbal. I didn't remember the emails, Devin sputtered. But it doesn't change anything. He's my father. He set me up. Carver drew out one last document, a screenshot, the text message Devin had fired off on my birthday. And here, Carver said, his tone going ice cold, is Exhibit C, the message that pulled the acceleration clause. Don't expect us to take care of you. I have my own life. Carver turned to face Dunlap. Your client's whole defense rests on undue influence and the warmth of a father-son bond. But in his own words right here, he's cutting that bond clean through. You don't get to play it both ways, counsel. You can't wrap yourself in the family relationship when it's convenient and throw it overboard when it's not. Dunlap's legal pad snapped shut. The pen went into his breast pocket. He'd already done the math. Take this before a judge and it wouldn't just be a defeat, it would be a humiliation. I believe we're finished, Dunlap said, pushing back his chair. He started loading his briefcase. Devin's hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve. What are you doing? You can't leave. Fight this, Mr. Dunlap. Dunlap peeled his arm free. There's nothing to fight. You put the debt in writing over and over. You signed the notes, then you torched your relationship with the lender on the record. My counsel to you, cut your losses. Beg because they own you legally. He was out the door before anyone could say another word. What settled in behind him was a thick, suffocating quiet. The air conditioner droned on. Devin sat stranded on his side of the table, stripped of everything that had propped him up. No bluster, no arrogance. Just a man staring across at his father with glassy, wet eyes. Dad! He breathed. I rose from my chair, straightened my jacket. What I felt wasn't victory. It was bone-deep weariness, but walking away now wasn't an option. Too much had already been paid to let it dissolve into nothing. We'll see you in court for the final judgment, Devin, I said. I walked out and left him there surrounded by the emails that showed he'd been lying long before he started failing. The latch caught behind me, shutting him in with every word he'd ever written. When the cheap lawyer's footsteps faded, the silence left behind was heavier than a shout. My son sat there folded into his chair the way a puppet folds when the hand pulls out. He stared at the vacant spot where his attorney had been, then dragged his eyes over to me. They were empty. Every trace of entitlement, every flicker of superiority I'd watched him wear his whole life gone. What I saw in its place was something raw. He was staring into a hole with no bottom, and somewhere in his gut, he understood I was the only one with a ladder. Carver hadn't moved. He kept tapping the pen against the tabletop in a slow, metronomic beat. That was the whole room. Tap, 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 like a clock running down. Devin dragged the back of his hand across his nose. So, this is how it ends. His voice came apart as he said it. You're going to tear my life apart, leave me with nothing. I pulled my elbows onto the worn surface of the table and held his gaze. What I saw across from me wasn't a 32-year-old man. I saw the chaotic, frightened boy who'd smash something and then shove the broken bits where nobody would find them. Ruining you isn't the goal, Devin, I said, keeping my voice low. And your money, I'm not after it. We both know the cupboard's bare. Even if I move to seize your assets, the lender grabs the car, the landlord grabs the apartment, the government takes whatever's left over. I'd be chasing dust. Devin frowned, thrown off balance. Then what's the point? Why put me through all this Because sometimes a field has to burn before anything worth growing can take root. Your financial world was rotten at its foundation, and I knocked it down. But I'm prepared to help you lay a real one. My hand went into my jacket, not for another legal filing, for a single folded sheet of paper, no official seals, no attorney's signatures, just words in my own handwriting. I set it on the table in front of him. There's a door out of this, Devin. A fresh start. The full debt, $482,000. The interest, every dollar in legal fees, gone. All of it forgiven. And I pull the lawsuit this afternoon. Devin's eyes locked onto the page. He couldn't process it. Something desperate and fragile lit up behind his face. Really? He managed. You'd actually do that, Dad. Thank you. I swear I'll pay you back when I get back on my feet. A new job, I'll figure it out. I raised a hand. There are conditions. 2, neither one is up for debate. His head moved in quick, eager nods. Name them. Whatever you need. I'll handle your yard. I'll repaint the whole house. I'm not looking for a handyman, Devin. I need someone to be a father to my grandson. I tapped the paper. First condition. You go after full custody of Finn. You make the argument that where he's living now is no place for a child, because it isn't. I've already found you an apartment and signed the lease. Nothing fancy, but it's decent and it's yours, with no rent due for 6 months, as long as you hold down a job. Devin gave a slow nod. All right. Yeah, I can do that. Finn deserves better. I want him with me. What's the second thing? I drew a long breath. The harder ask. The surgery without anesthesia. Second condition, I said, and the softness left my voice entirely. You file for divorce from Vanessa, today. It was like a temperature drop. Devin pushed back from the table as if I'd thrown something at him. No, Dad, no. I won't do that. She's my wife. I love her. She's not your partner, Devin. I said, no gentleness in it. She's a parasite. 5 years she's been drawing from you. She drove a wedge between you and everyone who cared about you. She burned through resources you never had. And when everything started collapsing 3 days ago, did she step up? She grabbed her yoga mat and bolted. She panicked. Devin shot back color, flooding his face. Stress does that to people. You don't understand her the way I do. She loves me. This is just a rough stretch. I glanced at Carver. He reached into a slim black folder and drew out a bank statement, sliding it toward Devin without ceremony. I had a feeling you'd say exactly that, I told him. So Carver ran a separate thread through her finances. Not just yours, Devin, hers too. Devin peered down at the document. What am I looking at? An account at Columbia Trust Bank, I said, registered under Vanessa's maiden name. She opened it 3 years ago. Work your way down the deposits. He tracked down the column. $200, $500, $1,000 here and there. She calls it an emergency fund, I said. Every loan you took from me, every commission that hit your account, every payment you thought was covering a bill, she was quietly skimming a cut off the top each time. I let him get to the bottom line on his own. $52,000, I said out loud. Devin went very still. The numbers were reorganizing themselves behind his eyes. 6 months back, I continued keeping my voice flat, and even, you sat in my office in tears asking me for $50,000. You said you were in over your head with a gambling debt. You said if Vanessa found out it would end the marriage. You were a wreck. Devin nodded almost to himself. That whole time, Vanessa had $52,000 parked in a private account. While you were falling apart and pleading with your own father to bail you out, she was sitting on more than enough to have pulled you clear, and she never breathed a word. She let you sink. She sat there and watched you debase yourself. She watched you put your name on a promissory note that cinched a noose around your throat, and she kept every dollar of hers tucked away. Devin stared at the page. His hands began to tremble. Denial was throwing punches at the evidence, but the numbers held firm. Why? He could barely get it out. Why would she do that? Because she was never in your corner. Son, I told him. She was wagering on your collapse. She was protecting her exit. And 3 days ago, the moment the money stopped, she didn't pick up the phone to offer you a lifeline. She called a divorce attorney. Carver pushed one final sheet across the table, a consultation receipt from a high-end family law firm dated the morning after the asset freeze. She's already moved on, Devin, I said, keeping my voice even. The only question left is whether you go down with her or cut yourself loose. Devin picked up the receipt. He read the date, he read the time, It was time-stamped 1 hour after I'd frozen the accounts. While he'd been sitting on the curb in the rain coming apart at the seams, she was across town writing a retainer check to dissolve their marriage. He made a sound low and guttural, the sound a trapped animal makes. He crushed the receipt in his fist. His eyes pressed shut, and the tears came fast, scalding. He remembered the look on her face in that hallway. He remembered her telling him, "I didn't marry a man, I married a potential." He remembered the yellow sticky notes plastered across my belongings. And in that moment it landed, he had never been a husband to her. He had been a resource to be drawn from. He pulled a long, shaking breath into his chest. It rattled on the way in. But when his eyes opened, the boy who'd been sitting in that chair was gone. In his place was a man fractured, yes, but one who was finally looking at the world with clear eyes. "Where do I sign?" Devin said. His voice had gone flat and final, all the air taken out of it. I slid the agreement across to him and put a pen in his hand. "You're making the right call," I told him. Devin said nothing back. He just signed. It wasn't the flourishing loop he'd used on the promissory notes. It was a heavy, jagged mark, the signature of a man closing one chapter and accepting that a harder one comes next. He set the pen down. "I want my son," he said. "I want Finn." "You'll have him," I promised, "and you'll get your self-respect back too. It won't happen fast. It'll cost you something, but it'll be yours for real, not rented, not purchased. Yours." Devin got to his feet. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't move toward me. He gave a single sharp nod, chin down. "Thank you, Dad," and he walked out. He walked with a straightness in his back I hadn't seen in years. Broke. Almost certainly headed for divorce. No roof to call his own. But watching him go, I knew something I hadn't known in a long time. He was free. The thing feeding on him had been removed. The recovery could now start. Time is the only auditor that can't be bought. It doesn't factor in your credit rating or your family name. It only tallies what you do with the hours you're handed. For my son Devin, the last 12 months have been the longest and most brutal stretch of his life. But they have also been the most honest. I drove over to the job site in West Portland yesterday. Rain, of course, because this is Portland, and the sky never lets you forget that nothing holds forever, not even the light. I pulled the truck up across the street and sat there watching. A new mid-rise apartment complex going up. Mud coating everything. The racket of jackhammers and diesel engines loud enough to rattle your fillings. And right in the thick of it, Devin. No Italian suit. A high-visibility vest thrown over a flannel shirt, stiff with dried dirt. No wine glass in his hand. A shovel. I watched him work. He wasn't going through the motions. He had a rhythm to him. Something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager with a baseball bat and something to prove. Sweat on his face. Grime smeared across his forehead. He looked worn through, but not empty. A foreman came over hollering something above the grind of a cement mixer. In another life, Devin would have rolled his eyes, would have muttered something cutting under his breath, certain he was above a man in a hard hat. But he just nodded, wiped his sleeve across his brow, and put the shovel back in the dirt. He hoisted a heavy bag of cement without a word of complaint. He just did what needed doing. I found out later he's pulling $22 an hour, less than he used to drop on a single lunch without thinking. But every Friday, that paycheck covers his own rent on the studio apartment I helped him get. He buys his own groceries, his own bus pass, still no car, and he pays me. Every month without fail, a check arrives for $200. Symbolic, sure. I told him the debt was gone, that he didn't owe me anything. He wouldn't hear it. He said he had to watch that number come down, even if it takes the rest of his life. He said he needed to carry the weight of what he'd borrowed to actually feel it. As for Vanessa, she evaporated nearly as fast as she appeared. Word got back to me that she relocated to Los Angeles inside a week of the divorce papers being signed. Instagram fills in the gaps that real life tries to paper over. She's with a producer now, 20 years older than her. Photos on yachts, red carpet appearances, diamonds that look like they belong to someone else. She wears that particular kind of happiness, bright and brittle, the kind that belongs to people sprinting away from something. She never reached out about Devin. Never asked about the debt, certainly never asked about me. She simply shed her old life and slipped into a new skin. I don't carry hatred for her. What I feel is closer to pity, because someday the hosts will run out and she'll be left staring at her own reflection, having hollowed out everything around her and found herself still hungry. But Devin is learning to feed himself. I watched him take his lunch break. He dropped onto a stack of drywall and cracked open a plastic container. No Wagyu. A sandwich he'd put together himself. And he wasn't eating it alone. 2 other guys from the crew were with him, and there was laughter. Not the managed careful chuckle you hear in conference rooms, but the real kind coming from somewhere deep. The laugh of a man with nothing left to perform. He spotted my truck, stopped mid-bite, stood up. I half expected embarrassment, thought he might turn his back. Instead, he raised his hand, a plain, tired wave. I gave one back. He tapped his watch back to work, and that was it. He didn't cross the street to ask for anything. He didn't come over to inventory his grievances. He just acknowledged me, held the line between us with a kind of quiet respect, and went back to the shovel. That shovel is giving him a more honest education than his business degree ever did. It's teaching him that money is a measure of something real time, effort, sweat poured out. Once you understand that you stop buying a Porsche to impress strangers you don't even like. You spend your money on a good pair of boots because there's a long road still ahead. I turned the engine over and pulled away from the curb. I didn't need to stay longer. I'd seen what I came to see. My son was no longer a millionaire on paper. He was a thousandaire in reality. And for the first time in 32 years, I felt genuinely proud of him, not for what he had, but for what he'd lost, and for the way he was shouldering that loss without flinching. The lake was glassy that morning, the surface holding a mirror up to the slow gray clouds moving overhead. I sat at the end of the wooden dock with my legs over the edge, watching a red and white bobber ride the stillness. Beside me, Finn gripped his little fishing rod with the grave concentration of someone taking it seriously. No tablet, no asking about video games, just the water and the waiting, and a boy learning something old about patience. It's been a year since I declared war on my own son. A year since I made the decision that real fatherhood sometimes means becoming the villain in your child's story, so he has a chance to become the hero in his own. People talk about unconditional love as if it's a blank check, as if it means absorbing everything your child does without consequence. They picture love as something soft and insulating a shield against discomfort. But I've learned differently. Sometimes love is the discomfort. Sometimes love is the hard wind that tears away the dead growth, so something living can push through. I looked over at Finn. He's coming up in a different world than the one his father had, a small apartment now. He watches his dad come home, tired dirt worked into the creases of his hands. He watches his dad count what's in the grocery budget. And because of that, Finn is absorbing the value of $1 before he's even tackled long division. He's learning that respect gets built with your hands. You can't charge it to a card and have it delivered. Devin is not the man I once pictured he'd become. He's something better, quieter. He takes more in than he puts out these days. The arrogance that used to sit on him like a coat of cheap varnish has been worn down by the grinding friction of an honest life. He's raw, but he's real. And now when he looks at me, he no longer sees a source of funds. He sees a man. I drew my line in, slowly feeling the gentle pull of the water, pushing back. There is a ledger locked in my safe that finally reads 0. The debt was settled not in dollars, but in character. I've come to understand that the greatest thing I can leave behind has nothing to do with the house, the stock portfolio, or the vintage furniture. It's the lesson that the only things you're entitled to are the things you've earned. It's the knowledge that rock bottom is the most solid ground there is to build on. Finn's bobber plunged beneath the surface. He sucked in a sharp breath, his eyes going wide. "Grandpa, I got one," he hollered. I didn't lean over to grab the rod. I didn't offer to take it from him. I settled back and let him work, watched him strain, watched him lock in, watched him find his own way through it. "You got this, Finn," I said quietly. "It's all you." And as I watched him haul that fish up out of the water, flashing silver against the flat gray light, I knew the Hartwell legacy was in safe hands. That's where I'll leave the story, with a small boy and a fishing rod and a father who finally understood what his own father was made of. This cost me more than I expected. Not the money. I never cared much about the money. It cost me years of sleep, a version of my son. I had to grieve before the real one could surface, and the particular loneliness of loving someone through a war they don't know you're fighting for them. I believe God doesn't waste the painful seasons. Looking back now, I can see that every hard step was clearing ground for something worth keeping. Here is what these father stories keep teaching me, and what I hope you take from this one. When someone you love is on a path toward ruin, protecting them from consequences is not kindness, it is delay. The longer you cushion the fall, the harder the eventual landing. If you ever find yourself funding someone else's entitlement document, everything, Not out of suspicion, but out of love, because the paper trail may one day be the only thing that forces an honest conversation. Rock bottom has a purpose. It is the only surface solid enough to build something real on. Don't rob the people you love of that foundation. And finally, Real Dad's Revenge is not about winning. It is about refusing to let the people you love stay lost just because confronting them is uncomfortable. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, a parent carrying a quiet burden, or someone wondering whether tough love is still love, please pass it along. Subscribe to His Hidden Revenge so these stories find their way to you every time. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. Until next time, take good care of yourself.